The quantum communication array hummed with an unsettling dissonance. Commander Zorax of the Krelltak reconnaissance fleet felt something she had never experienced in her 3 centuries of galactic exploration. Pure, unadulterated dread. A holographic display flickered, its normally crisp azure lines wavering like something was fundamentally wrong with the very fabric of reality. Initial planetary scans of the small blue world designated as Earth should have been routine. Preliminary reports suggested a primitive civilization, barely capable of rudimentary space exploration, nestled on a moderately hospitable planet in an unremarkable solar system. But nothing about this planet was moderate. The first anomaly appeared in the atmospheric composition data. Earth's atmosphere was a chaotic blend of gases that should have been toxic to any known life form. Oxygen, a highly reactive element that most species carefully regulated, ran wild here, supporting the most diverse and aggressive ecosystem ever encountered. The planet's magnetic field was another impossibility, a protective shield so complex that it seemed deliberately designed to ward off external threats. Zorax watched as her junior analysis team worked frantically, their multi-limbed forms contorting with increasing agitation. Young Selpor, typically the most composed of the crew, had developed a visible tremor in his tertiary sensory tentacles. "Repeat the scan," Zorax commanded, her voice a low resonant frequency that typically calmed her crew. But nothing was typical about this moment. The second scan produced even more disturbing results. The planet's surface was a living, breathing entity of impossible complexity. Creatures that defied every known principle of biological development populated its landscapes. Microscopic organisms could survive in conditions that would vaporize most advanced life forms. Massive predators coexisted with delicate ecosystems in a state of constant, brutal evolution. And then there were the humans. Initial psychological profiles suggested a species of contradictions. They were physically fragile. No natural armor, limited sensory capabilities, painfully slow reproductive cycles. Yet every other metric screamed of a potential that bordered on the terrifying. Their technological development followed no known pattern. Most civilizations progressed in careful, predictable stages. Humans seemed to leap forward in explosive bursts of innovation, driven by something beyond rational explanation. They could go from basic stone tools to nuclear technology in a fraction of the time any other known species required. "Commander," Zelpor's voice cracked, "the communication intercepts. They're impossible to categorize." Zorax approached the secondary display. Thousands of simultaneous communication channels flickered, each one a kaleidoscope of information that seemed to defy normal communication protocols. Humans didn't just exchange information, they'd weaponized it. Their language was a living, breathing organism that could communicate multiple layers of meaning simultaneously. A recovered transmission caught her attention. It was from a human source, discussing something called memes, a communication method so complex that it seemed designed to break any standard analytical framework. The message contained layers of irony, cultural reference, and psychological manipulation that would take most species decades to decode. "We're detecting multiple technological signatures," reported Senior Analyst Kremix, "but they don't follow any consistent development pattern. It's like they're innovating in multiple directions simultaneously." Zorax knew then that everything was about to change. This was not just another planetary reconnaissance. This was first contact with something fundamentally different. The Galactic Concordance had cataloged thousands of civilizations. They had encountered species that could manipulate quantum fields, civilizations that lived inside stars, collective intelligences that spanned entire solar systems. But nothing had prepared them for Earth. As the final scan completed, a single line of data burned itself into the communication log, a message that would be studied, feared, and eventually legendary across multiple galaxies. "Caution. Approach with maximum uncertainty. Humanity is not a civilization. It is a force of nature." Dr. Krell's research tentacles trembled as he reviewed the latest data on Earth's biosphere. In his 7 lifespans of xenobiological research, He had never encountered a planetary ecosystem that so completely destroyed every known scientific paradigm. The tardigrade alone was enough to shatter conventional understanding of life itself. These microscopic creatures, dubbed water bears by humans, represented a biological impossibility. Krell's holographic display showed creature less than a millimeter long that could survive in conditions that would obliterate most advanced life forms. Vacuum of space. No problem. Temperatures approaching absolute zero. Merely an inconvenience. Radiation levels that would vaporize most organisms. The tardigrade would go into cryptobiosis, essentially shutting down its entire biological process. And wait. But the tardigrade was just the beginning of Earth's biological madness. The platypus emerged as a perfect example of the planet's evolutionary chaos. A mammal that laid eggs, with a duck-like bill, that could detect electrical impulses. And oh yes, the males possessed venomous spurs that could cause excruciating pain. It was as if evolution on this planet was less a careful process and more a drunken experiment conducted by a mad scientist. Consider the bombardier beetle, a creature that had developed a defense mechanism so ludicrous that it seemed like a biological joke. When threatened, this insect could literally explode a chemical reaction from its own body, creating a scalding hot spray that could instantly deter predators. The beetle had essentially weaponized its own internal chemistry, creating a living chemical weapon that defied all rational biological development. Deep in the oceans, creatures pushed the boundaries of what life could be. The immortal jellyfish, Turritopsis dohrnii, could literally reverse its aging process. When stressed or injured, it could transform its cells back to their earliest form, essentially achieving biological immortality. It was like watching a creature hit a reset button on its own existence. But humans were the true apex of this biological insanity. Their ability to survive seemed to mock the very concept of environmental limitation. They had populated every conceivable environment on the planet, from the frozen wastes of Antarctica to the brutal heat of the Sahara. Their bodies were walking miracles of adaptive potential. Take human skin, a seemingly simple organ that was actually a complex, adaptive system. It could regulate temperature, fight infections, generate vitamin D, and provide sensory input. When damaged, it could heal itself, often with minimal scarring. But more incredibly, human skin could adapt to different environments, changing color and texture to provide better protection. The human immune system was a horror story of evolutionary brilliance. Unlike most species with relatively static immune responses, humans developed immunity that could be passed down generationally. When exposed to a pathogen, they didn't just fight it. They learned from it, creating increasingly sophisticated defense mechanisms. Dr. Krell's most shocking discovery came from human medical records. They had a documented case of a woman who had survived a gunshot wound to the head, with the bullet lodged in her brain, and not only lived but maintained most of her cognitive functions. Another human had survived falling from an airplane without a parachute and walked away with minimal injuries. Their reproductive system was another marvel of biological engineering. Human females could store sperm for extended periods, had concealed ovulation, and possessed one of the most complex hormonal systems in the known universe. Their ability to form emotional bonds was so advanced that it functioned almost like an additional survival mechanism. Even human psychological resilience defied biological understanding. They could survive extreme psychological trauma, adapt to virtually any social environment, and transform negative experiences into sources of strength. A species that could turn its own suffering into innovation was something no evolutionary model could predict. As Dr. Krell finished his report, a single annotation burned at the bottom of his research log. Recommendation: do not attempt to understand Earth's ecosystem. It will understand you first. The universe, he realized, had been playing by a completely different set of rules, and Earth was about to change everything. The diplomatic records of the first contact would be studied for millennia, not as a model of successful communication, but as a case study in psychological deconstruction. Ambassador Krelax of the Galactic Concordance had spent 4 decades preparing for interspecies communication. Their translation matrices were considered the most advanced in known space, capable of parsing linguistic nuances across hundreds of civilizations. They had successfully mediated conflicts between silicon-based life forms and energy beings. Diplomatic protocol was their art form, negotiation their religion. They were utterly unprepared for humans. The first transmission came through standard diplomatic channels. A simple greeting, translated into 17 different communication protocols. But something was wrong. Each translation carried multiple layers of meaning, some contradictory, some deliberately misleading, some so deeply ironic that they seemed to exist in multiple semantic dimensions simultaneously. Human language was not a tool of communication. It was a weapon. Take the concept of sarcasm, a linguistic mechanism so complex that it required the listener to simultaneously understand the literal meaning of words and their exact opposite. Most species communicated in direct, linear patterns. Humans had transformed language into a multi-dimensional chess game where words were both the pieces and the battlefield. Their internet was the true horror of psychological complexity. What appeared to be a simple communication network was actually a living, breathing organism of collective intelligence. Memes, conceptual units that could transmit entire philosophical arguments in a single image, moved faster than any known information transfer system. A single image could communicate layers of cultural critique, emotional complexity, and strategic insight that would take most civilizations' volumes to express. The diplomatic logs revealed something terrifying. Humans could completely destabilize an opponent's psychological framework without firing a single weapon. They understood the fundamental weakness of any system was not its physical infrastructure, but its underlying beliefs. One recovered communication intercept demonstrated this perfectly. A human strategist discussing conflict resolution wrote, "The most dangerous weapon is not a gun, but the ability to make your enemy doubt everything they know about themselves." Their method of psychological warfare was so sophisticated it bordered on the mystical. They could turn an enemy's strength into a fatal weakness through nothing more than carefully constructed narrative. Historical records showed how they had transformed entire global perceptions through storytelling, media manipulation, and what they called soft power. Consider their approach to cultural integration. Where most species would use force or direct intervention, humans infiltrated through entertainment, education, and subtle cultural exchange. They didn't conquer, they seduced. Their movies, music, and art were Trojan horses of psychological transformation. The most chilling example came from their own historical records. During the Cold War, 2 superpowers engaged in a conflict that was less about physical territory and more about psychological domination. They developed entire fields of study: propaganda, psychological operations, media manipulation, that turned information itself into a battlefield. Their understanding of psychological resilience defied all known models. Humans could transform personal trauma into collective strength. A species that could experience the most brutal forms of oppression and turn those experiences into art, innovation, and social movement was something no psychological model could predict. Even their humor was a form of psychological warfare. Jokes were not simple entertainment but complex social mechanisms that could critique power structures, challenge fundamental societal beliefs, create collective emotional experiences, destabilize established narratives. The final report from the first diplomatic mission was a single, haunting observation. Humans do not communicate. They infiltrate. They do not negotiate. They rewrite the very foundations of perception. Ambassador Krelax's personal log, recovered years later, contained a single line that would become legendary in diplomatic circles. "We came to make first contact. They made first transformation." Dr. Vextera, chief technological historian of the Galactic Archival Institute, had dedicated her entire existence to studying technological development across known civilizations. She had documented the quantum crystalline networks of the Zorn Collective, the living computational matrices of the Celebrex, and the energy state technologies of the quantum dancers. Nothing could have prepared her for humanity's technological trajectory. Human innovation was less a linear progression and more a controlled explosion of possibility. Where most species develop technologies through careful, incremental steps, humans seem to leap forward in impossible bursts, driven by something beyond rational scientific methodology. Curiosity was not just a trait for humans, it was a fundamental force of nature. Consider the Manhattan Project, a perfect microcosm of human technological madness. In less than 4 years, a group of scientists working in complete secrecy developed a weapon that could obliterate entire cities, not because they were ordered, not for immediate survival, but because they were curious if such a thing could be done. The very concept was so alien that most technological historians couldn't comprehend it. Their internet was perhaps the most terrifying technological achievement. What appeared to be a simple communication network was actually a living, breathing global intelligence system. Unlike centralized technological networks, the human internet was decentralized, adaptive, and seemingly impossible to control. It could root around damage, create collective intelligence, and transform entire social structures in minutes. Take their approach to space exploration, a perfect example of technological unpredictability. Most advanced civilizations would develop comprehensive, carefully planned space programs. Humans, they went from ground-based flight to lunar landing in a mere 66 years, a time span that was less than a geological blink. The Apollo missions were a masterpiece of impossible engineering. Computers with less processing power than a modern calculator guided humans to another celestial body. They calculated complex orbital mechanics using slide rules and handwritten calculations. It was less technology and more an act of collective human will. Their technological development followed no known pattern. Most species develop technologies in careful, specialized domains. Humans seem to innovate simultaneously across multiple fields, with technologies in one domain instantly transforming others. A communication technology would suddenly revolutionize medical research. A materials science breakthrough would transform energy production. Dr. Vextera's research uncovered something even more disturbing. Humans didn't just create technologies, they personalized them. Each device became an extension of individual creativity. Their smartphones were not just communication devices, but personal portals of infinite possibility. A single handheld device could navigate global positioning systems, capture high-resolution images, process complex computational tasks, and connect to a global information network. The concept of duct tape alone was enough to make galactic engineers weep. A simple adhesive that could repair spacecraft, create emergency medical tools, solve problems in ways no advanced civilization could comprehend. It was a metaphor for humanity itself, crude, unexpected, and terrifyingly effective. Their approach to artificial intelligence was particularly fascinating. While most civilizations feared AI as a potential threat, humans seemed to view it as another frontier of exploration. They didn't just create AI, they tried to understand consciousness itself. Each technological limitation became an opportunity for reimagining fundamental concepts of intelligence and creativity. Open-source technology was another uniquely human concept. Most civilizations guarded technological secrets like precious resources. Humans would deliberately share technological innovations, believing that collective progress was more important than individual advantage. It was a technological philosophy that defied every known economic and development model. The final section of Dr. Vextera's report contained a single chilling observation. Humans do not develop technology. They transform reality itself, with technology as their primary language of reimagination. A recovered transmission from a human technologist captured the essence of their approach. We don't just push the boundaries of what's possible. We don't even recognize that boundaries exist. Dr. Xanthor, chief xenobiological researcher of the Galactic Medical Consortium, had seen life in forms that would shatter most species' understanding of biology. crystalline beings that communicated through quantum resonance, plasma-based life forms that existed within stellar cores, consciousness that inhabited multiple dimensional planes. But humans broke every single biological rule. Their immune system was less a defensive mechanism and more a sentient war machine of adaptive potential. Unlike most species with static immune responses, humans developed immunity that was both immediate and generational. When exposed to a pathogen, they didn't just fight it. They studied it, learned from it, and created increasingly sophisticated defense mechanisms that could be passed down through genetic memory. The medical logs were a testament to biological impossibility. Case after case demonstrated human regenerative capabilities that defied all known scientific understanding. A woman named Malala Yousafzai survived a point-blank gunshot to the head, with the bullet passing through her brain, and not only survived but maintained most of her cognitive functions. Another human, Julianne Koepke, survived a 10,000-foot fall from an airplane into the Amazon rainforest and walked away with minimal injuries. Their genetic code was a living, breathing algorithm of survival. Where most species had rigid genetic structures, humans possessed a fluid, adaptive system that could rewrite itself in response to environmental challenges. Epigenetic research revealed that human DNA was less a fixed blueprint and more of a dynamic, responsive network. Consider the human ability to survive in extreme environments. They had populated every conceivable ecological niche on their planet, from the frozen wastes of Antarctica to the scorching heat of the Sahara. Their bodies were walking miracles of adaptive potential, capable of adjusting metabolic processes, skin pigmentation, and physiological responses with remarkable speed. The human brain was perhaps the most terrifying biological system ever encountered. Unlike most species with relatively fixed neural networks, human brains demonstrated neuroplasticity that bordered on the miraculous. They could literally rewire themselves in response to new experiences, creating new neural pathways with ease that most species would consider impossible. Their reproductive system was another marvel of biological engineering. Human females possessed one of the most complex hormonal systems in the known universe. Concealed ovulation, the ability to store sperm for extended periods, and a reproductive cycle that allowed for continuous sexual activity were just the beginning of their biological complexity. But the most shocking discovery came from human medical research during planetary challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated a level of collective biological response that defied all known epidemiological models. While most species would have collapsed, humans developed multiple vaccine technologies in less than a year, a feat that would take most civilizations decades. Their psychological resilience was itself a biological mechanism. Humans could transform psychological trauma into a source of strength, a form of adaptive response that blurred the lines between mental and physiological survival. A species that could turn its own suffering into innovation was something no evolutionary model could predict. Even human skin was a complex, adaptive system far beyond simple protection. It could regulate temperature with remarkable precision, fight infections independently, generate vitamin D, provide complex sensory input, heal itself with minimal scarring, adapt to different environmental conditions. The medical logs recovered from human research facilities told a story of continuous biological innovation. They weren't just studying their own biology. They were actively trying to understand and reshape it. Genetic engineering, neural interfaces, regenerative medicine. Humans approached their own biology as a frontier of exploration. Dr. Xanthor's final report contained a single chilling observation. Humans are not a species. They are a living experiment in biological potential, constantly rewriting the very definition of life itself. A recovered transmission from a human medical researcher captured the essence of their approach. We don't just survive. We evolve in real time, turning every challenge into an opportunity for biological transformation. The universe, it seemed, had been playing by a completely different set of rules, and humans were about to change everything. Historian Kelnack of the Galactic Archival Commission had spent centuries studying civilizational development. Their research had documented the rise and fall of thousands of species, each following predictable patterns of growth, challenge, and either adaptation or extinction. Humans shattered every single one of those patterns. Where most civilizations would be destroyed by a global catastrophe, humans transformed disaster into a catalyst for unprecedented innovation. The great pandemics, world wars, economic collapses, each became a crucible of human potential, forging breakthrough technologies and social transformations that would have broken any other species. Take the Great Depression of the 1930s. Most civilizations would have collapsed under such economic strain. Humans, they invented entire new economic systems, developed groundbreaking infrastructure projects, and laid the groundwork for technological revolutions that would reshape the entire planet. The Hoover Dam, built during the depths of economic crisis, was not just an engineering marvel, it was a statement of human defiance. Their approach to failure was perhaps their most terrifying characteristic. Most species viewed failure as a terminal condition. Humans saw it as raw material for innovation. Silicon Valley had transformed failure into a cultural philosophy. Fail fast, fail often was not just a motto. It was a fundamental approach to existence. Consider the space race, a perfect microcosm of human innovation through chaos. When the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, it was meant to be a moment of American humiliation. Instead, it became the catalyst for the most explosive period of technological development in human history. Within 12 years, they would land humans on the moon, a feat that would take most civilizations centuries. Duct tape emerged as a metaphor for human ingenuity. A simple adhesive developed during World War II became a universal problem-solving tool that could repair spacecraft, create emergency medical devices, and solve problems in ways no advanced civilization could comprehend. It was crude, unexpected, and terrifyingly effective, just like humanity itself. Natural disasters became opportunities for collective reimagination. Hurricane Katrina, which devastated New Orleans, sparked innovations in urban design, emergency response, and community resilience. Earthquakes led to breakthroughs in architectural design. Volcanic eruptions transformed understanding of geological systems. Their educational systems were designed to weaponize curiosity. While most species created rigid learning structures, humans developed educational models that treated failure as a critical part of learning. A child's failed experiment was not a punishment, but a moment of discovery. Creativity was not just encouraged, it was considered a survival mechanism. Open-source technology demonstrated their most radical approach to innovation. Most civilizations guarded technological secrets like precious resources. Humans would deliberately share technological innovations, believing that collective progress was more important than individual advantage. Linux, created through global collaboration, became a technological marvel that challenged every existing model of technological development. The Internet was the ultimate expression of this chaos-to-opportunity transformation. What began as a military communication project became a global nervous system of collective intelligence. It routed around damage, created new forms of economic and social organization, and transformed every existing model of human interaction. Even their art and culture became mechanisms of innovation. Music, literature, visual arts. These were not just entertainment, but complex problem-solving tools. A jazz performance was a live demonstration of collaborative innovation. A street art movement could spark global social change. Dr. Kelnack's final report contained a single profound observation. Humans do not solve problems. They transform problems into portals of unprecedented possibility. A recovered transmission from a human innovator captured the essence of their approach. We don't see obstacles. We see unfinished opportunities waiting to be reimagined. The universe had been operating under a set of rules that humans were about to completely rewrite. Chaos was not something to be feared. For humans, chaos was just another word for potential. Galactic Archive's warning beacon pulsed with a singular, haunting entry. Approach Earth with maximum caution. Probability of complete systemic reconfiguration, 99.7%. Ambassador Krelax of the Diplomatic Concordance had seen civilizations rise and fall across 1,000 star systems, but nothing had prepared them for the human phenomenon. The diplomatic logs had become less a record of interspecies communication and more a collection of psychological case studies in absolute bewilderment. Every species that significantly interacted with humans underwent a fundamental transformation. It was as if humanity was a cosmic virus of innovation, rewriting the very code of civilizational development. Trade routes that intersected human-influenced space became legendary. Merchants would speak in hushed tones about the unpredictability of human negotiations. A simple trading agreement could suddenly become a complex cultural exchange, a technological breakthrough, or a complete reimagining of economic principles. The Zarn Collective's official report was a masterpiece of diplomatic terror. Humans do not negotiate. They rewrite the entire framework of interaction. What begins as a simple trade discussion can result in entire economic systems being redesigned, technological paradigms being transformed, social structures being completely reimagined, philosophical understanding being fundamentally challenged. Diplomatic training programs developed entire specialized courses just to understand human communication. Their language was a living weapon, capable of simultaneously communicating multiple layers of meaning, weaponizing irony, and transforming entire cultural narratives in a single conversation. Consider the concept of soft power, a human invention that defied all traditional models of interspecies influence. Most civilizations used direct military or economic pressure. Humans would transform entire societies through culture, entertainment, philosophical ideas. A single human movie could do more to reshape a civilization's understanding than centuries of diplomatic negotiations. The Internet became the ultimate diplomatic nightmare. A decentralized, constantly evolving network that could mobilize global movements in hours, transform social understanding instantaneously, create collective intelligence beyond any known computational model, route around systemic limitations with terrifying efficiency. Recovered communication logs showed how humans could turn seemingly negative interactions into opportunities for mutual understanding. Where most species would escalate conflicts, humans would find ways to transform tension into collaborative potential. The most terrifying aspect was their ability to absorb and transform external influences. Unlike most civilizations that resisted external cultural impacts, humans would integrate new technologies rapidly, adapt to new cultural concepts with incredible speed, transform external influences into unique innovations. Xenosociologists discovered a consistent pattern in human interaction. Every significant contact with another civilization resulted in technological acceleration, cultural cross-pollination, fundamental reimagining of existing social structures. The Quantum Collective's final diplomatic assessment was a masterpiece of controlled panic. Humans are not a species to be encountered. They are a force of systemic transformation that cannot be predicted, controlled, or fully understood. Approach with absolute caution. A recovered transmission from a human diplomat captured the essence of their approach. We don't just exchange information. We create entirely new ways of understanding each other. The universe had been operating under a set of rules that humans were about to completely rewrite. And the most terrifying part, they were just getting started. In the vast archives of galactic civilization, one planet would be marked with a warning that was equal parts terror and respect. Here be dragons, and they are rewriting reality itself. The Galactic Archive's warning beacon pulsed with a singular, haunting entry. Approach Earth with maximum caution. Probability of complete systemic reconfiguration, 99.7%. Ambassador Krelax of the Diplomatic Concordance had seen civilizations rise and fall across 1,000 star systems, but nothing had prepared them for the human phenomenon. The diplomatic logs have become less a record of interspecies communication and more a collection of psychological case studies in absolute bewilderment. Every species that significantly interacted with humans underwent a fundamental transformation. It was as if humanity was a cosmic virus of innovation, rewriting the very code of civilizational development. Trade routes that intersected human-influenced space became legendary. Merchants would speak in hushed tones about the unpredictability of human negotiations. A simple trading agreement could suddenly become a complex cultural exchange, a technological breakthrough, or a complete reimagining of economic principles. The Zarn Collective's official report was a masterpiece of diplomatic terror. Humans do not negotiate. They rewrite the entire framework of interaction. What begins as a simple trade discussion can result in entire economic systems being redesigned, technological paradigms being transformed, social structures being completely reimagined, philosophical understanding being fundamentally challenged. Diplomatic training programs developed entire specialized courses just to understand human communication. Their language was a living weapon, capable of simultaneously communicating multiple layers of meaning, weaponizing irony, and transforming entire cultural narratives in a single conversation. Consider the concept of soft power, a human invention that defied all traditional models of interspecies influence. Most civilizations used direct military or economic pressure. Humans would transform entire societies through culture, entertainment, philosophical ideas. A single human movie could do more to reshape a civilization's understanding than centuries of diplomatic negotiations. The Internet became the ultimate diplomatic nightmare, a decentralized, constantly evolving network that could mobilize global movements in hours, transform social understanding instantaneously, create collective intelligence beyond any known computational model, route around systemic limitations with terrifying efficiency. Recovered communication logs showed how humans could turn seemingly negative interactions into opportunities for mutual understanding. Where most species would escalate conflicts, humans would find ways to transform tension into collaborative potential. The most terrifying aspect was their ability to absorb and transform external influences. Unlike most civilizations that resisted external cultural impacts, humans would integrate new technologies rapidly, adapt to new cultural concepts with incredible speed, transform external influences into unique innovations. Xenosociologists discovered a consistent pattern in human interaction. Every significant contact with another civilization resulted in technological acceleration, cultural cross-pollination, fundamental reimagining of existing social structures. The Quantum Collective's final diplomatic assessment was a masterpiece of controlled panic. Humans are not a species to be encountered. They are a force of systemic transformation that cannot be predicted, controlled, or fully understood. Approach with absolute caution. A recovered transmission from a human diplomat captured the essence of their approach. We don't just exchange information. We create entirely new ways of understanding each other. The universe had been operating under a set of rules that humans were about to completely rewrite. And the most terrifying part, they were just getting started. In the vast archives of galactic civilization, one planet would be marked with a warning that was equal parts terror and respect. Here be dragons, and they are rewriting reality itself.